guys, do we have a mutiny in the ACC right now? We've
Mutiny.
been talking about the Pac-12 and their media rights drama and possible realignment and who's in and who's out, who's maybe checking the grant of rights. Well, we actually have that happening in the ACC. The Athletic, multiple other outlets reporting that 7 ACC schools reportedly talked with their lawyers to try and figure out, okay, how deep is this grant of rights? How tied to this conference are we? Florida State, they came out recently and said everyone in the ACC is just thrilled to be here. We couldn't be any more aligned. We're all singing Kumbaya. This is the same athletic director at Florida State who also said that, hey, we're falling $30 million behind the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC on a yearly basis. So I'm not buying it. I think the ACC has a terrible media rights and grant of rights deal right now, securing those schools to the same media deal through 2036, I believe is the tenure. I tell you what, guys, I think the question, as our favorite pirate captain, Captain Jack Sparrow, asked, why is the rum gone? I think this might be the answer.
Yeah, I love that we're calling this a mutiny. I want to run with that. The branding of this is the ACC mutiny. 100%. I'm behind that.
This is the episode title, by
We
the
need
way.
a drop. We need something to just update people on this. But I feel for Florida State, right? I feel for the Clemsons. I feel for the Magnificent Seven. I've seen some calling it that are starting to lawyer up and just really scrutinize this document because they are the ones that are carrying that league, and they are the ones that are the reason that the ACC is what it is from a football standpoint. So yeah, of course you're going to be wanting your school, looking in the best interest of your school, and looking in the best interest of your school is not letting it fall further and further behind the other schools around the country that can actually compete for national championships. Because no disrespect to Boston College, no disrespect to the other members of the ACC. I don't know why I singled out Boston College, but I'll throw a couple other Wake Forest, that the smaller schools in the ACC, you're probably not realistically looking at competing with the Ohio States and the Alabamas of the world. But Clemson, Florida State, and Miami, and the rest of those schools, they definitely want to dream big like they can, and they definitely can. We've seen it from Clemson in the last decade. So, of course, they're going to look out for their best interests, and falling $30 million a year behind. And that number is only going to get bigger because the SEC and Big Ten are smart and don't stretch their grant of rights out 15, 20 years in advance. It's not conducive to fielding a championship team, fielding a competitive team at a national level when you're falling that further behind your competition. So I don't blame them one bit for looking at all their options and seeing if they can actually get out of this. Whether or not they can, it seems like they would have figured it out by now because they've been looking at this. We've been hearing about this just at an individual school basis. We didn't know it was 7, half the league looking at this, but we have heard individual schools looking at this, I think dating back to January or February of this year when we started hearing rumblings out of Florida State. So I think they would have found something by now. I think, a lot of this saber rattling, definitely going into the ACC meetings was, voicing their displeasure and saying, we really need to get this figured out sooner rather than later. But I think if they would have found an individual solution, they would have found it by now, right?
You would think so. I mean, the way that I look at this is you have to, and let's start with this. To be fair to a team like a Boston College, right, or just any other ACC program, I don't know why we're singling them out, but to for every Boston College, you can also look across and say, oh, well, like, there's Vanderbilt in the SEC, right? Or there's, a Rutgers, or there's all sorts of different teams across this country, even in powerful conferences who realistically, they're not looking at championships. They're not looking to compete, at a high level with the Ohio States and the Alabamas of the world anyways either, right? So just because they're in that conference, and I know that's not what you're saying, but I just want to be fair to, some of those other teams. But guys, the ACC schools that are talking about this, your Florida States, Clemson's, North Carolinas, all those, they're not talking about competing at a national level. They have to compete regionally. I mean, Florida
Yeah.
State has to compete with the fact that Florida is getting way more money than them for the fact that they're not even really that much better as a program. They're not better as a football team than where Florida
No.
State is now. Their coaching situation much less secure. Their roster's in a much worse place. And so when I look at this, I say, Florida State has to compete there, right? Clemson has to worry about the fact that they got this guy named Shane Beamer, who's starting to kind of,
Who just
get
kicked
on a
their
little
butt
bit of
this
a heater
season.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's starting to get on a heater and figure something out there for South Carolina. So, if you're some of these teams who are going to be losing that much money to rival schools in your region, you have to find a way to step up or you're going to get left behind. It doesn't matter where you are now. You have to step up at some point or else you're going to fall behind. So, when I look at this whole situation, I think about the ACC and what they're doing. I get concerned about longevity, not just from the grant of rights standpoint, but from the fact that yeah, they are dealing with direct competition in their region. When we talk about the Pac-12 and everything else, they're kind of off by themselves on the other side of the country, which might be part of their issue from the media rights perspective. But it's also it's not like they're competing, because 50 miles down the road, there's another team from a big conference that's competing for those looks as well. So I think you have to look at this as a holistic issue for these conferences and not just looking at it from, oh, it's just the SEC and the Big Ten. Those are the two big ones, but there's going to have to be somewhere for these other conferences to exist. I think the ACC is in a pretty rough spot right now. Honestly, the thing that the ACC is probably hoping happens most is that the Pac-12 can't figure it out, so that kind of solidifies their status, for the media deals nationally. They're probably looking at the Pac-12 saying, "Yeah, y'all keep figuring it out. Keep talking to Ion, please."
Well, it's so curious to go back and look at Michael Alfred's quotes. I believe from February was when he was talking
Mhm.
with the Florida State Board of Regents, and yeah, made it very clear. Hey, guys, listen. This we're not we're not thrilled with the ACC because we're falling $30 million behind the Big Ten and the SEC on an annual basis as it currently exists. Now, this past week, he said the exact opposite. We are, quote, thrilled to be a part of the ACC. He also said everybody in the conference is in lockstep. They're all unified on making this the best conference that they possibly can. To me, that's all hot air
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the ACC has to find a new rev share model that actually works for the schools, right? When they were the first domino to fall, it's kind of like the quarterback market in the NFL. Nobody wants to be the first quarterback to get an extension because the market resets every single time someone signs. So if you're number one, you're setting the market. That means the market only goes up from there, right? So by the time you've got 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks signed, or in this case, conferences renegotiating media rights deals, you're going to be at the bottom of the totem pole.
Mhm.
And it's very similar, I think, to what we saw with Texas and OU leaving the Big 12, where that grant of rights is going to hold them back so much. They've got to find some sort of legal loophole or buyout, which it would be a massive amount of money that they left on the table if any ACC school were to find the legal ground to leave. But if there's enough of an incentive for, say, the SEC says that, hey, we'll take Florida State and Miami, you better believe they're going to make up any money they leave on the table with the ACC. Really, to me, the only question is what gets put in place first? Is there a new revenue share model that gets ironed out behind closed doors in the ACC, or do teams' lawyers come up with a tangible excuse and an invitation that they can accept to another conference?
Well, at the end of the day, this is hot air. Like, there's nothing else that it can be because if you're an athletic director at Florida State or wherever, of course you're going to be saying that things are great and dandy and everyone loves it here. Because how else are you going to negotiate for a contract, right? How else are you going to go? They saw how this went with the Pac-12, right? Arizona's AD did the same thing. He was like, "No, everything's great. Media deals coming soon. It's going to be even better. It's going to be awesome." And we're still waiting months later, right? And maybe he doesn't really know what the word "soon" means, but I mean we're all waiting on this deal to still go. the ACC is going to be the same way, right? They saw what happened and they said, "Oh, if we don't really project, a strong front and project that we have a great future ahead of us with big brands, big teams, all that stuff like that, there's no way that we can get a deal together." And of course, they're going to project that because probably behind the scenes, they've looked at their situation, they realize, yeah, there's not really a way out of this, and so we're going to fall behind unless we can get that new deal structured. Of course, you were saying, "Oh no, we feel thrilled to be all together." It's like, well, they're clearly not thrilled about losing $30 million a year when it comes to their competition. They're not thrilled about that.
If you were
But they
thrilled, you wouldn't be having the conversations at all.
yeah,
So,
they wouldn't have to be asking the question if he was thrilled. Did they ask Alabama, "Are you guys thrilled to be in the SEC with their media rights?" That's an obvious answer. Of course, they're thrilled about it, right? And so it's for me. I just look at this and I say they don't have any negotiating room if they don't project strength and unity as a conference. And right now, the easiest answer for Florida State is to continue with what they have. It's much easier for them to continue in their conference. They don't have to worry about restructuring, rescheduling, and mixing everything up. That's the easiest way forward, the less the least complicated way forward, at least. And so I think that has to be where they start and say, we got to find a way to at least get competitive, even if we're just 10, 15 million in the hole. We'll take that. We can still keep up with that.
yeah, and they are the most interesting thing I think to me in all of this is the rumors that what these 7 schools are pushing for is unequal revenue sharing that's based on performance on the field, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've ever seen that in a
No.
conference. We've definitely seen unequal revenue sharing, and we saw that almost kill the Big 12 conference about 10 years ago. But I don't think we've seen it based on performance on the field. And in theory, I'm not necessarily against that because, Boston
The F1
College has,
model, baby.
yeah, and European soccer does similar things as well. Like you earn your way up, you earn more revenue for your club by having a good season at your level and being promoted or relegated if you have a bad season. So, Boston College, keep picking on them, but if they have a magical season, right, and win the ACC in a 12-team playoff year and get an automatic bid, then hey, you just upped your recruiting budget to sustain that success and become a staying. I don't hate that. I don't necessarily hate that if I'm a lower level team that feels slighted by this. If I'm Wake Forest and the success that they've had recently and I get, paid out based on actually winning, and I look at Miami who's sitting there at 5-7, yeah, give me that. Give me your cut, Miami. I don't hate that necessarily.
Now, does that mean that if Boston College is like really bad or Wake Forest is really bad, that they get relegated to like Coosa or something?
I would
Like, do
love
they have
that.
to go play in a different like Group of 5 conference at that point, or
I mean,
like what are we talking about?
we're about to transition to video game talk in a second.
I was
I
gonna
always set up
say,
my
Hey,
dynasties
now.
with a relegation spreadsheet, but I love that. I mean, if we want to talk pipe dream college football off season, like yeah, relegation and promotion would be absolutely incredible if we could figure that out. But yeah, no, revenue sharing based on performance on the field and incentives to reach the college football playoff, win the ACC, that almost drives it back to the importance of conferences and gets us away from this national arms race that it feels like we're dipping into. So I don't know. It seems like that would not last forever. That would certainly go out the window in 2036. It would be a way to appease these teams that think that they are the class of the ACC for the next 10, 15 years until that grant of rights expires. And then I'm sure they would be gone, right? Like as soon that's just kind of a bone to keep them here for a while. But I don't hate that idea in theory.
Well, okay, so let me ask this. First of all, we're not getting invited to Chestnut Hill anytime soon. That's so we can mark that
Oh
off
man.
the bucket list, I guess.
Gracious him. How about